If you win enough football matches in most countries, you move up, you keep going, and eventually you'll reach a professional league. That's the idea. In New Zealand, it doesn't quite work like that. We have a football system with around 15 tiers, thousands of players, hundreds of clubs, and decades of history, and then it just stops. No clear promotion into a fully professional league, no final step, just a ceiling that everyone kind of accepts. And the strange part is that wasn't really a mistake. It's a result of a system that evolved and never quite connected back together. Now is also a great time to talk about this because of the World Cup. New Zealand participated in the World Cup, and whenever that happens, people naturally ask, where do these players actually come from? Because if you're used to European football, you assume something fairly simple. You play locally, you rise through the domestic pyramid, and that leads you into professional football. In New Zealand, that assumption only half works, because there isn't just one pathway, there are two. The first is the domestic pathway, local clubs, regional leagues, national competitions, a system built on volunteers, community football, and semi-professional environments. It produces a huge number of players. It keeps the sport alive, but it doesn't consistently lead into a full professional league in New Zealand. The second pathway is completely separate, the export pathway. This is where players are identified early, develop through the system, and become professionals in other systems entirely. For example, Chris Wood, Premier League footballer with Nottingham Forest, had an excellent season. Previously Burnley and Newcastle as well. Joe Bell, he's developing in Europe with Viking FK in Norway. Eli Just is currently playing in Scotland, and recently he's had an amazing campaign at the World Cup. 3 goals in the World Cup competition, despite New Zealand being knocked out early. Let's not talk about that. De Bruyne! That kind of performance doesn't go unnoticed. There's been media talk around interest from other clubs like Celtic. It wouldn't be surprising if other European clubs are also watching him closely. That's the key point. New Zealand absolutely produces professional footballers. They're just rarely developed within a fully professional domestic system. In most footballing countries, those two pathways aren't separate. You develop domestically, you rise through the pathways, and the system leads into professional football. In New Zealand, they run in parallel. Sometimes they connect, often they don't. And understanding the split is the key to everything else. Football arrives in New Zealand in the 19th century through British settlers. Knock knock, it's the British, we're here with football, but it immediately competes with rugby. And it spreads in a much more localised way. Travel is slow, communication is limited, so football develops region by region. Wellington builds a system, Auckland builds its own, and in 1981, a national association is formed. But the early football is still mostly provincial. In 1970, New Zealand introduces a national league with promotion and relegation. For the first time, there's a real sense of progression. When you league, move up, keep going. By 1992, the National League collapses, and what follows becomes a pattern in New Zealand football. Instead of a stable system, we get repeated experiments, different formats, different structures, different solutions to the same problem. In 2004, New Zealand shifts to a franchise-based system, 8 teams, summer season, no promotion, no relegation. This stabilizes top-level football, but this creates a separation from the traditional club pyramid. Grassroots clubs continue to exist, they continue developing players, but they are no longer directly connected to the highest domestic competition. So you end up with something unusual. A country where football exists at every level, but the pathway between those levels isn't fully continuous. New Zealand is also just difficult for national sports in general. The geography is spread out, travel is expensive, and most clubs rely heavily on volunteers and community funding. So the idea of a fully professional European-style pyramid was never really realistic. It didn't fail to become one, it simply evolved differently. In 2021, more connected national structure returns. Regional leagues feeding into national competitions again. So the pyramid technically exists once more. But above it sits the A-League, a licensed, closed competition. No promotion, no relegation. Wellington Phoenix have been there since 2007, Auckland FC have had a couple of seasons and joined more recently. But those positions aren't earned through the domestic pyramid. They are granted separately. And then there's Auckland City FC, not to be confused with Auckland FC, a semi-professional club competing domestically but regularly representing Oceania internationally thanks to winning the Oceania competition. Which leads to one of football's most unusual contrasts. Part-time players, teachers, plumbers, accountants, playing against fully professional footballers. It highlights something important. New Zealand football can produce teams that can compete internationally, but the structure they come from doesn't reflect that level of professionalism. And then something changed. The Oceania Football Confederation launched the OFC Professional League in 2026, and it actually happened. For the first time, New Zealand are part of a fully professional regional competition. Auckland won the inaugural season, which is either a sign of early dominance or football history doing what it usually does and immediately establishing a pattern. Wellington, however, weren't included in the inaugural season, which is always an interesting moment in New Zealand football, because whenever something new is created, there's always a bit of a period everyone looks around and asks, right, are we including Wellington? This time the answer was apparently, not this time, let's go with Christchurch instead, which is bold. Not really, but because nothing says Pacific-wide professional league quite like immediately starting a domestic geography argument. But jokes aside, it's still a major shift. For the first time in history, there is a professional league above domestic football in the region that exists in practice and not just theory. It's early, it's imperfect, but it's new. So what you end up with isn't really a broken pyramid, it's two systems running in parallel. A domestic structure that supports football at every level within New Zealand, and an international pathway that drives players elsewhere once they reach a certain point. And for a long time, those systems didn't really connect. But now, with World Cup experience, players performing in Europe, and a new professional league in Oceania, the gap is starting to close. It might not end up looking like a pyramid anymore. It might end up looking like something else entirely. Thanks for watching. Please remember to subscribe.